Hello everyone, thank you so much for joining us. Today we have one of our volunteer training sessions for spring 2022 and we are looking at Treasurer Basics Part 2. Some of you will have joined us for Part 1, gosh, it must have been I think March potentially. Anyway, we're joined again by Ros Epson and she is our finance volunteer. So without further ado, I will hand you over to Ros.
Thank you. Hi, I'm Ros, finance volunteer. Lovely to see you. This is part 2 of the training for treasurers, and I thought that the reason we're doing this is that wanted to provide some basic ideas for treasurers. It's not absolute requirements, and different treasurers have different areas of knowledge and different experiences in their own districts. And some might be quite happy with setting up their accounts and running it, and that's absolutely fine. But what we thought was we'll give you some ideas if you're not quite sure where to start, or maybe thinking you're doing more work than is necessary, and everyone's got enough to do without doing anything extra. So we're just recapping on that. On the first session, I talked about my suggestion that there's sort of just 3 things that you need as a treasurer, which is a current bank account, a system for recording your transactions, and somewhere to keep your supporting documentation. So that was 3 things we covered in the part 1. This is part 2, where we're going to look at how to do a bank reconciliation, and then my 4 top tips for minimizing your workload and keeping yourself sane and being treasurer without killing yourself. Okay, so I am going to share my screen. Sorry, let me start talking about the bank so I'll do the bank reconciliation first. So with your bank account, so what I'm suggesting is that you, as you do transactions, you record them, and you'll record them in your income and expenditure record. But that periodically you check that against your bank account. We suggest every month, but at the minimum every quarter, just to make sure you've got everything written down and correctly, and that it all agrees. And then if you've made a mistake, you've got an opportunity to find the error and correct it, so that when you're going ahead, you know, it's right up to that point, and it come the end of the year, if you've made a mistake, you've only made a mistake in a month's worth rather than having a whole year's worth to look back on. So it's a way of just keeping on top of things and making you know where you're going. Right, I'm now going to share my screen and show you a few things. You don't want that. Okay. So this is an example of an income and expenditure record sheet that you might be using. And this is the model one that we suggest that you use, but you're free to use your own. So this one has on it the balance at the start of the year. And then on this side, it's got the income with all the income headings. And these are the same as the ones in the year-end return. So if you use this, the total at the bottom can just slot into your year-end return. So it's got the income headings and it's got the expenditure headings. And what this sheet does is it tells you the balance at the start of the year, and then it adds in the total of income to date, subtracts expenditure to date, and tells you what your balance should be. And so it's that balance that's what you've recorded up till now that you need to just make sure agrees with your bank statement. So when you get your bank statement, you compare it. If you've got your bank statement and it says £340 on there, well, you know, you're right. So you don't need to do anything else. But I'm going to show you, for correctness, an income and expenditure record sheet, which ideally we'd like you to do if you can. So this is in where it is. It is in the keeping records, financial records section of the website, and I hope you've had a chance to look at that. But if not, on the Woodies website, if you go for advice to groups and then finances, you'll find this in here. And in here, there's a number of things that you might find useful, one of which is guidance for bank reconciliations. So if you follow that, it'll give you a link to a bank reconciliation thing that looks like this. So what you'll do is you'll put in your bank balance, and then it's all tidy, and it'll hopefully agree with the figure at the bottom. And if you can get you sign it and someone else signs it, and then we've got that check on that a second person is looking after the accounts. So if it's all agrees, lovely. However, it might not be, and that's what you need to check. So if it doesn't, then you go back, you'll have your bank statement in one hand and your record in the other, and check that the figures agree. And you may find that there's been a discrepancy. You've written down a 5 as an 8 or vice versa, and that's why it doesn't agree, or you'll have miscalculated a figure or something, or the bank will have done. So you can correct your records, make sure that they agree, find that error, and then go ahead. So that's one cause of a possible discrepancy between the bank statement and your own figure. And the other one are transactions that haven't gone through. So on this one, maybe you've given somebody this check, Sue, this check for £39 for resources, but she hasn't banked it. And so that's not gone through. Alternatively, it may be that this check was paid into your account, but right at the end of the month. And maybe when you're looking at it, it doesn't agree. So what you would do is, if it doesn't agree, so maybe it says £315 in your bank account, and then you realise that there's that check to Brooks didn't go through, and there's a £25 check that's uncleared. At that point, that'll adjust that. Then it will agree, and then you've got a little record that you know that it wasn't agreeing just because that check hadn't gone through. So this is a good way of just, and so you know that once that's gone through, that'll be all right. It's a good opportunity for you to check things, make sure they're right, and maybe for that check that hadn't been cleared, remind someone to go and do it. Otherwise, you'll find the error next time, and it'll mess you up at the year end. Okay, I'm going to stop sharing my screen now. So that's the bank reconciliation. And if you keep on top of those, you're pretty well. You can feel very smug each month that you've done that and you know it's right. And so you know you're on track as you go along. So I mentioned just part 2 of this. The 4 things I suggest that my top tips for keeping on top of things. So that is number 1, my top tips, which is monthly bank reconciliation, check it's right. And it means you don't need things too long before you do your accounts. So that's number 1. The second thing I would suggest was about cash. Cash, you do need to record, as you do with everything else. Let me actually go back to sharing my screen and show you the income and expenditure record. So on this record sheet that we've got part of it for cash, and you need to do exactly the same. If you've got cash, you need to check it at the beginning of the year, check it at the end of the month, and write down under all the headings what you got cash come in for and what you spent it on. And the reason I mention it is that people, with anything that's gone through your bank account, you've got a record on your bank statement of what's gone through. You don't get that with cash, so you have to write it down in a book, otherwise you'll lose track of what's happened, and that's a cause of an awful lot of extra work at the year end. So that's one thing I should say. So the second thing is, so I would suggest, as far as possible, you minimise the use of cash. Obviously, will be suggestions. It's really what works in your district, and if that doesn't work, fine. But just think about it, because it's hard to track and it can be quite fiddly dealing with it. So you might want to, rather than collect subs every week in cash, maybe suggest that it's done termly or reduce it altogether, whatever. So that's just a suggestion, because it seems to cause an awful lot of problems. My third suggestion would be looking at the number of bank accounts you've got in your district. For each bank account you've got, you need to keep the signatories up to date, and there's quite often a problem that signatories move on and you haven't got access to your bank account because you can't get hold of the signatories. It's also something that you need to reconcile periodically and make sure that's done. And increasingly, there are charges applied for bank accounts. Sometimes with the co-op, they charge head office rather than the district. So it's something to think about, reducing the number of bank accounts. It's extra work, it's potentially extra cost. So you might want to, and if you've got accounts that aren't well used or aren't used at all, you might want to close them. There's forms on the website about, so that you can transfer any balances in underused accounts to your main district account and tidy things up that way. So that's my third suggestion. My fourth thing to suggest is about netting off, and that's where you've got two transactions to the same person, one coming in, one going out, and they balance them off and just do the difference. So for example, if you've got a group leader that's paying £50 for a camp but has got £15 worth of expenses, they might just pay in £35. The problem with that is frequently it goes wrong. You end up with a receipt for £15 and no expenditure for £15 that goes with it, or less money coming in for the camp than you were expecting. And those things just often just cause confusion. So I would suggest, just if you get those, don't let them off, treat them as two transactions, an income and an expenditure. Record them separately, and it'll probably just make your life easier. Okay, so those are my four suggestions. Keep on top of the bank reconciliations and transactions, do them monthly. Minimise the amount of cash transactions that you've got. Minimise the number of bank accounts that you've got, and don't let things off. Okay, I think that is it. I hope that helps. If you've got any questions, you're very free to ask me. Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you, Roz. That was really great. Thank you so much for that. I've just put up on the screen for everyone your contact details should they want to ask you any more questions following today's session. So Roz is at ros.epson@woodcraft.org.uk. And then just while we're all on the call, our next training sessions that we're running will be, the first one will be next Tuesday, and that's going to be a group surgery with myself as membership and groups coordinator, and Natalie Braunton, our memberships assistant. And that will actually be themed on running through sort of the new member process. So if you're a membership secretary, that might be a good one for you. We've then got Introduction to International Camping, which is really exciting as we approach Common Ground. And then we've got Communication 101, which will be with our comms manager, Lauren. So hope you can join us for some of those. But again, Roz, thank you so much for the session today. I really enjoyed that. And any questions, feel free to send them through to Roz. But that's all. Bye for now, everyone.
Thanks, bye.
Now I've just got to end the recording.